So let us get started today. Yesterday we learned, just to revise, yesterday we learned about databases. So let's just try to connect the dots so that we can start with next topic. Uh, Yesterday we learned about databases. Important things to remember about databases are like there are two types of databases in terms of whether it is SQL supported or SQL not supported. So one is called as SQL databases, or they're also called as RDBMS databases. And there are no SQL databases. Actually, it's a misnomer, but we have gotten used to use this. So examples are MongoDB, Redis, and so on. You can. It depends on usage, but yesterday I have also told a use case where both of them are used together. Um, Examples for this are SQLite. So SQLite is a lightweight database and it does not have any authentication and it runs on your own machine. You cannot like um, if you want to host database in different places, you use MySQL, which is open source, or Postgres SQL, or any of the other SQL related databases. Okay. So yeah, so a use case for SQLite is sometimes it's possible that your embedded systems require some data bookkeeping um, components. For example, you have a sensor and you want to maintain, like keep track of uh, um, at what point of time what was the say temperature, if that sensor is sensing temperature. So in that case you can just add a timestamp and then the temperature. So since this is lightweight, it does not consume a lot of memory because it does not have like uh, too big of metadata and things like that. It does not have any like server running or anything like that. So it consumes less compute and storage. So you can do something like 2503 2025, something like that, and then temperature like 28 degrees Celsius or whatever it is. So this helps you to keep track within your embedded system. So that is the use case of lightweight databases like SQLite. So we looked at SQLite 3 yesterday, and any database will also have um, like few parameters to be able to connect to that. One is your host name and port. So this MySQL and PSSQL, all this uh, you know um, SQL databases, when you host it, so you'll get a port number and also you'll get a service number, service endpoint. So that will automatically resolve to that, but you can also change the ports. So host, port, and user authentication, which is user auth. Most of the times it is username and password, username and password. Okay. And database can be hosted in a separate um, server. The reason is to keep data and the process or software separate. Okay. Software is running on a different servers or multiple servers. And also you can scale this independent of this data, right? You can say if there is a lot of traffic, you can actually like copy run the process your software in multiple instances. So yeah, that comes up with a new problems, but yeah, you can, this is called as scaling up. And also you can have data growing and you can put it into multiple servers if this database goes down. So you can bring up a new database, you take a backup, and there are several operations which are related to databases. So that is the reason we generally separate them. So these are the key points to remember. And we saw examples, code snippets for MySQL and PSSQL. But if you are used to SQLite, you can do other things easy. It's because yesterday we saw that the pattern is the same thing. And of course, you're not going to write the code. You need to ask your Copilot or Chat GPT or whatever you're using to generate the code. But in order to generate the code, you should know what you're trying to do, right? So that is our main goal. So you figure out what we try to do, we're trying to do, and we should know what are the tools related to that, or else it will generate code by default, and you won't know underlying design and architecture and why you are using SQLite, or say NoSQL database or anything like that. And when you actually deploy, there will be like new problems which you have not accounted for. So that's the reason you should know the component, you should know how to use it. But the code generation is like is not a major hurdle. Okay, so once the code is generated, you just need to like back it up. Okay. So that's about databases that we studied yesterday. That's a revision. Today we will look at so far what we have done is we have uh, okay, I'll just mention the components that we have done so far. So we are trying to develop a new subscriber service, right? Subscription service. So if we break that down into different components, which we have already done, so uh, quickly it is we have got news, and we have put that into news.py, but this is just one module. And we have got calendar where our tasks are stored, and we have got weather, which we are using weather API, and what else? Weather, yeah, what is the study else? Weather, yeah, emails, yeah, emails. So these are the data that we need to collect. So these three data, um, and then we are going to aggregate this somewhere, which is say aggregation code. Okay. And then we send out a mail using mail, uh, mail module. Okay. So when we run, say, let us take this entire component, entire box, and we want to deploy this as a product somewhere else, right? So when we deploy into a different computer, say I'm going to erase this. So, and just make this was one product, which is like, this is my product. And this product is going to be hosted on some server, right? So this is your server. Of course, you can run it on your laptop and keep manually triggering this final script, which is, say, let us call this as main.py or aggregate.py or anything like that. And then you keep on like collecting the subscription input from like manually, which we try to do it in like loops.py, where you enter your name and age. Similarly, you can have like their email address and so on, collect the subscriber information, put that into the database. So press the key, press the execution button, and then it sends it, right? So that is like for our testing. So but if you think of it as a product, so which we are trying to build, so it should be a complete product, right? So product has different attributes, so which we will cover in coming classes. But in order to deploy this somewhere and to be able to uh, run as independent product and have the interfaces for the users to be able to do stuff. For example, this is my product, and if I imagine, so it might have an UI where people will come in, and so this is the UI that they have got. We'll generate the UI as well. So because you don't need to know anything about UI, but you just need to know what are the interfaces that UI is using, and generation of UI is easy, and you don't need to know about the code because UI is for, as a backend developer, you don't need to worry about UI, but we will generate and see how it's. But it's I think we'll do it probably on Friday or next week. So okay, UI would look something like this. So it will have um, say subscribe button. So when it I'm just imagining it like that subscribe button. When it clicks, so you probably will get a pop-up saying that you enter your name and just email ID. So when he or she gives this information as input, so this must go into my product. This is my input, and our database must get updated. And at that moment, just keep uh, waiting, because on a based on a schedule, for example, every morning at 7 a.m., we are going to schedule this product or schedule the script or API or whatever the interfaces that we are going to develop. So every morning at 7 o'clock, it is going to our process is going to go through the database and look up all the subscribers and send a mail out to each of the subscribers, and then it's going to end up in their mailbox. So probably this is their mailbox. So every day at 7 a.m., probably they will look at this. So we are not going to run it uh, manually. So there is no manual intervention. So zero touch. Okay. So this is how the product looks, right? So if you subscribe to any of the news channels or any of the like subscriptions, like pop-ups, so you get continuous emails, right? For example, shopping, you might have subscribed to scientific journals and so on. So that is the way we are trying to do. And if it really and based on this, you can actually build some interesting things where you can actually make an application and probably make it as a paid service or something like that. If the idea is really good, people will actually subscribe, right? So that is what we are trying to, that is the quality of the product that we are trying to achieve. So in order to run the product and in order to have the UI to be able to provide information to this particular product, so let us just cut this UI for now, slice it, and let us just think what interfaces should product have so that the outside world can use. Okay, so we have already done this. So this interface should be a web interface, right? So web interface, which is like HTTP, like so if you imagine what are the things that is involved, it is on HTTP, which we have already explored. So like you can do a request for the product, and then there is like a REST APIs, which we have just done get from REST APIs. We haven't from some other services. So REST APIs, and you can access the product using such an interface. So interface, we are trying to fix it on the interface. It's a web interface, and UI should be able to access it. So for the backend developers, so since UI is not like readily available, probably other team is working, and we are not bothered about the UI, but we just need to make sure that the interfaces that we are developing, if those things work, we can ask UI team or UI person or ourselves in this case to utilize those APIs and build a UI based on whatever their skills. For example, UI, as so far, what we have learned is all the code that you see on the web, that is on the browser, it contains only like mainly two or three things like HTML content, probably JavaScript, and then cascading style sheets or something like that, CSS. So these are the only components which drive the entire internet. Okay, so the you for UI person who is using things like React JS and like Value JS and whatever. There are several frameworks. So what these frameworks do is on their development environment, they use these things to generate this this code. So that is why they are called as frameworks. Okay, they're not the language themselves. So React is a uh, JavaScript generation framework. So it has its own things, but just remember that all these things you can hand over once the interface is fixed. You can hand it over to the UI development team. But as backend developers, what we are uh, bothered is that my interfaces are working fine. So in order to make these interfaces, so we need to create a server, right? Because so far we have seen that we have accessed news, weather, calendar, and mails. All of them are servers sitting somewhere, right? But now what we're trying to do is we are creating our own server. So our product as a server. So let us call this as say a subscription server, sub, something like that. This is a total product. So here we are creating our own server. So how do we create our own server? What are the components of a server? We'll just learn about it. Okay. And how do we expose the REST APIs? So what is a server? Now you must have an idea already. So any server will have so it's basically at Linux level or at process level. It is just a process which is not ending. That means it is in a infinite loop, and a process and also has got access or opened up a port, and it is watching some events on that port. So this is a process, and code, if you put any code in infinite loop, that is while loop, we haven't studied the while loop, but you can do it in for loop as well. For loop, so we can put this in a code. So once you press something .py, it keeps running, right, until you press Control C, which is like an interrupt to stop the process. So that is how you create a process which is never dying until you switch off the computer or you send a signal to that process to kill that, like pressing Control C, or you go to Linux terminal and use some commands to kill that. Okay, so that is how you create a like uh, a program which never dies. That is called as a process. The process which is like always running. Okay, so that is how you when you switch on your computer. So all the process comes up and things like don't it is waiting for input, right? Like terminal, like the notes I am using until I press the close button here, so it will never go off, right? So that is how the processes are working. Okay, so this is about the process, and then this process, if it is listening to a port is nothing but, so you must have seen RJ45 cable, which is the network cable that is getting connected to us interface, right? So that is called as NIC interface. So I think we have discussed this. So NIC, which is network interface card, on that card you can connect the RJ45 cable. So that is the connection to your external world or internet. So this hardware, in order to communicate to the other parts of the computer, it is connected on the hardware, and these things are called as ports. So it is just like for Linux or for the operating system, it is an external peripheral device, and it keeps watching for the interrupts. Okay, so that's basic about the process and the NIC card and things like that. But in programmatically, how do we address that? So whenever we open a port, what does that mean? There are several levels of the port. So you can actually directly access the hardware port uh, by process. So that those are called as sockets. Okay. And but there are several protocols already built for us to take data from sockets and parse it in a way that the programs understand. So that is where we there are protocols that we are talking. So this is raw socket, which is just L1, and then IP is a layer where it interprets the data into IP packets, and then you have TCP, and then on top of this you have HTTP and so on. So all these things is done automatically by libraries which people have already developed. So if you just open the port, so we can tell what type of port it is. So there are different kinds of protocols. So one is TCP and one is popular, are like TCP and UDP. And we also saw like there is like SMTP and so on. So there are like hundreds, thousands of protocols. Like for example, mobile phone uses like so many different protocols other than the internet protocols. So basic idea is there is a process which is running. It has opened a socket, and then on top of that socket we are operating that. So using a program. So how do you open a socket, or how do you initialize a socket? Is in a pseudocode way. It is just a file in terms of Linux. So Linux considers everything as a file. Okay. So even in Windows, you can think like that, but Windows considers different as a peripheral device or something like that. I don't know what it is called, but in Linux, it's a file. So just like we are opening a file, right? So we opened file just like this. So something like a.txt, and in a write mode or a read mode, and then what we get is a file descriptor. So using this file descriptor, we have written some data into that. And then when you call this, there are like several internal calls, and then finally it goes to operating system, and operating system is the one which triggers some code. Probably it is written in C, C++, or whatever, but finally it's a machine code, so right? So that is the executable level. So we are not bothered about these things, but you should know that, okay, what happens when you trigger write? Exactly same thing is happening even in the ports. So what do we open and what do we write is we open a port. So we tell what sort of a type of the port, and then we tell what port you want to open. We also give a number. So when we give this, open something with this number, internally it goes and communicates to NIC card, operating system, and then there are a lot of levels, and then operating system will request for. Uh, so at this moment you are requesting for a certain port to be open of type, say TCP IP, or if you are using Python libraries, it will automatically open a HTTP port. If you're using some of the libraries, okay. So which we are going to see next. So this is how it is a file operation, but the file is not a normal file. It is a network file, or not network file. It's a socket of type socket. Okay, it's a socket file. So operating system is going to go and request. For what happens if you try to open the same file and right? For example, even if you open a.txt again, some is equal to a.txt and w. So we discussed about if you try to write multiple times or from multiple processes with the uh, with multiple processor, or in the same process, if you try to do multiple things on the same file, the outcome is like undefined, because it can get corrupted, or operating system can say that, okay, a file is already open, and say that it won't allow you to open the file, and so on. Okay, so that is the lock which is provided by the operating system. So similarly, when you try to open the same port using multiple processes, say you are writing a program in Python today, and tomorrow you write in some other language or in the same other process, somehow you try to open the same port, operating system is going to tell that, okay, this port is already in use. Okay. So these are the things about port, what it does, and how things are by layer how things are organized. Okay, so this is about the what is port and how do we initialize a port. Okay, and coming to specifically how does Python do that. So there are several interfaces. Now we are bothered, or we are focusing on creating a port where we can readily provide APIs. We are going to be the API provider. For example, ours is subscription service, right? So once I create this service, I'm going to publish the APIs to UI team, or probably as API as a service, whatever. So APIs I need to define before developing. So what are APIs? So you have URL, and then you have your um, resource locator, right? So URL, the complete this part is your DNS part, where something like abc.com, and then you have some more things here like a folder structure. For example, let us define this, and then let us define as some version. So these are just convention. So you can simply go and say some slash news, but we don't want to do this in a professional way. So there is a format, but so generic is like API, so that we know what we are accessing, and say some version number of that API, and the API name. For example, let us say subscription or subscribe is our API. So this entire thing is required to access your web service. So when we actually define this and when the program is running, so if somebody does, how do we access APIs? Right? We have already learned using Python, you can use request library. And so there are several functions or several operations that you can do on an API, right? What are those operations? One is get, um, post, and delete. There is also put, and there is patch. So these are nothing but on database, they are CRUD operations. Get is read operations. C is post, which is like to create something. Update is patch, and delete is delete. Okay. So this is how your these are the operations. You can also define the APIs saying that only allow get, do not allow post. For example, subscribe, right? If somebody is um, now we have somebody comes and subscribes to a particular our subscription service using one API, say post API, because we are going to create an entry, and then he or she wants to modify uh, the subscription. So if we disallow patch, which is update, he won't be able to update anything. We can only when we allow it through programmatically, and then we can he can patch that or update that. Patch is nothing but update. So if her or his email ID is changed, you can come and update. So that feature we haven't developed so far, and then we say that this operation is not allowed. Okay, so you can actually define the actions of APIs. Okay. So, and then how do you use that API? Coming back here using request library, and then the request dot get is nothing but it will call HTTP get, and dot post will call post, and dot patch we're going to call patch, and dot delete, and so on. Okay, we'll see that. So this is the URL. URL is equal to this. Let me just put that into a variable called URL, and then request dot post this URL. Once I send this URL to this, obviously I'm going to get some response, which we have already done. So this is the way we create our own uh, API endpoints, and we instantiate a server, and allow users to access those APIs. So if you learn this part, you can create now you know how to create interfaces, HTTP interfaces to external world. So once you understand this, you can write code and generate any sort of like products POC, and then you can put it out in the world, and then you can create your own service. Okay. So this is about web service. Now let us look at the code and how it looks and what are the libraries that are used. Okay. So there are several libraries. So popular libraries are like Flask, Fast API, and Django. You must have heard in your like company and probably blogs and so on. So let us try to understand what they are. Okay. So let me just uh, create a file called as API server.py. So now we have understood the things. So I'm going to say use one of the frameworks and generate the code and look at that, and let us try to understand what we have already understood so far, and then connect the dots. Okay. So I'm going to ask I need to create an API with endpoint. You can actually elaborate this, but that's fine. I need to endpoint uh, API version 1, say subscribe. Okay. So what is the so this is the endpoint. So what is the action? So this API should take input from um, subscriber subscriber um, and subscriber inputs are name and email ID. So these are the inputs. So what you need to do after this? So you need to connect to database, right? And store the values in SQLite DB. Right. First. So this is our, so of course this is like additional feature I'm asking, but we will just look at this part. Okay. So let us generate the code. It's like magic. Okay. Okay. So let us try to understand what it has done. I'm going to get this code here. Okay. So now you know the like basics of how what is a port and stuff like that. So we'll just understand. Okay. Um, so there is a popular library called as Flask. So there are other libraries like Django and Fast API and so on. So this is one of the popular ones. So it's a well tested and people are using this. So you can use this. So it's called as Flask. So what this does is, so let us look at like there's a class Flask, so you don't need to worry about that. So using a Flask is like very easy, and you have request JSONify, some more libraries and some this. So let us look at our API specifically. So this is initDB, which we are not interested at the moment. So we will look at that later. Let us look at this part. Okay. So um, so you can see this particular line here, which is line number 24. It has got something at the rate app here and dot route. We will understand what it is. And then there is, it looks like a function call. Yeah, it is a function, and then it has got inputs variables or parameters. this and this. Okay, so we are telling the library to create an endpoint, which is this, and the things that we have discussed, like opening a uh, port, and then um, reserving that port and all these things. So it is on HTTP, so we don't need to give the port number, but it's already there. Okay, so that is what we are, and then creating a server, which is a never-ending process. In the sense that that process doesn't get killed until you press Control C. All of these things is going to be taken care in this library. So specifically, it has, you can using this particular. So once you use that line, that at the rate app, so this line is going to run that this particular app.route, and it is going to create the server and all these things. So you don't so as a user, as a developer, you don't need to worry about underlying um, nuances of creating a port and all these things. It's already taken care by this library. So, but you need to understand like what is the flow. Unless you get it, it's difficult to like imagine what's happening. So it's like a black box for you, and it's like always insecure to deal with that. Okay, so understand a little bit and move on. So you don't need to get in deep, but understand that okay, this is how it works. Okay, so now let us try to understand what is happening inside. So you can see that if somebody clicks on UI saying subscribe button, in the back end, this API is going to hit. Say, let us call this as, say we have hosted on, say, subscribe, subscribe abc.com. And that is not there here. So that we will see how to access this and do all these things. But yeah, let us, for now it will be on your own computer, and that is called as local host, and it's got its own IP. Local host has IP address 127.0.0.1, and for HTTP the ports are already defined, so you don't need to worry about that. So this, and then I think it is 8080, and then this particular API. So this is what is getting it to this. So that is how we access. So endpoint user, who is a UI developer, or you can access directly on the web using this API. So it will have API v1 and subscribe. Okay. So this is what is called as endpoint. Okay. So complete endpoint is this. So for whenever we talk about endpoint in while developing, so this part is endpoint. So why this is called as an endpoint? Because this is the interface or the point where such the users or the UI developers are going to take this and develop on top of it. So this is your API endpoint you had defined, and somebody clicks on subscribe button. So this is the function it's going to hit. So you can see that this is what those are called as routes from a design point of view. It's called as route. Why it is called as route? Because you do some action, and then somebody should be routing that HTTP external world to your Python code, right? So that is the reason it is called as route. Okay. So yeah, so that's about it. Routing. So what is the external world here? Your server, which is a port, and then you get this particular request. So your protocols are going to read what is coming in. It is going to, like, just like we did, right click and saw what is the uh, HTTP API, right, in one of the classes. I think news or calendar somewhere, right? Forgot. So we saw what is the API that is getting triggered in the backend and what is the function or what is the operation that is getting triggered. So exactly same thing is going to happen in at the Flask end. So Flask is going to do that. So it will look at headers and all these things, and then it is going to route this point. So if this point was not defined, so people would get end users will get some errors on their web page. So which will obviously encounter in some time. So this is your API. You have created an API, and then your data is coming here. Data is nothing but whatever we have sent from there, but it is not visible to us until we have this particular variable. So we didn't uh, get JSON. So we got the JSON from that request, and then within the data, of course, we'll have something like name and email ID. So whatever user has entered from the UI or using the API, it will get populated here. It is coming here. And if it's not there, we have some error condition handling here saying invalid output. So this is an just like any API, right? It has got we need to also tell the user that something is wrong and what is wrong, and we need to set some status code as well. So this is a status code that we are going to set. So far we have just used status code from other servers. Like so we have used 200, which is like okay. When you did access the calendar, you get like 200, and when you access the news web page, if it's accessible, and it will give the status code. Okay, so somebody has must have coded that in, so in their servers, but in our server, so this is what we have. So this is error handling, and then this is how we are getting the data. So why we are getting this data? Because we want to do further operation on it. What is the operation that we are going to do? We are going to put that into database, right? So that is what we are trying to do here. So we did that yesterday. You can just glance it over. You can see that okay, there is connection for a database, and some code is getting executed here. SQL code, and name and email ID is the data that we are fetching from here, and we have parsed that data. It is going here, and then it gets into the database. Okay. That's all. So that is what we wanted to do. So let us try to access, let's try to run this program and understand how it looks for um, end user. Okay. So I'm going to run this. So now you can see that this part. So whatever we have studied so far, it is exactly here. So this is the program that we have invoked, right? So this is api.server. You can simply do Python api.server, but when you click on this, uh, it uses absolute paths. Okay, that's all. Okay. So that is why it looks longer. So let us focus on this part. Okay, you can see that the program has not ended. It is like waiting for some input. Okay, or it looks like that. It's like it's stuck, but it is a process which is running on your operating system, and it is not never going to end until there is a problem, like until there is exit somewhere inside the code, or you press the control C, or you go to Linux terminal and then kill it. So until that, it's going to stay there. So what we studied, it's a process which is always running. So that is what it is doing. And you can see these things. So like there are some logs here. So server serving Flask app API server, debug mode on, debug mode in the sense that, so all these frameworks have got some modes. So where if something goes wrong, you can see detailed logs. So this is nothing but we have studied about logs, right? So in their backend, whoever has developed Flask or any other libraries, they have set log level. So this is debug mode on. So probably they have enabled logger dot debug is equal to level is equal to debug or something like that. I don't know, but yeah, just imagining. So that is your debug mode. So this needs to be disabled when, because you get too many logs. So this needs to be disabled when you actually send it to production. Okay. So running this on development server, do not use this on production development and whatever. So it is a lightweight server, which it is running on your laptop or the server that you're. So you can see that it tells that this is the server and this is the port number. Okay. And it says, okay, this to quit and restarting start, whatever, something. Okay. Don't worry about this, but this is just a log information. But important point that we need to understand is whatever we study, this is a process and it is listening on some port. It has logged onto some port. The port number is 5,000. We haven't specified any port here. By default, it is taking 5,000. We can also specify the port number. So for example, when you are running, say, two servers here, say API.server, and you are running one more time, you are triggering API.server. So you will get an error saying that okay, 5,000 is already being used. Okay. So let us try to, I'll just try to show that. Right, that's, okay. Let me create a terminal. Let me try to run that again. Okay, did it got killed? Okay, it is running on the same thing. Okay. So it got, you can see that it got killed and automatically it is running. But when you run with the same server, you'll get an error. Okay. So you have got the port number, you have got the IP address, and you can see that HTTP is appended there, which means that we are automatically using HTTP protocol, which is a web, which runs the web. Okay. So this is how we created our own server. Now the problem is, okay, now I have created server. How do I send the input, or how do I utilize the API that you have developed, right? So that's the question. So let us try to write a client. So this is my server. So let us write client.py for this server. Okay. Now this server, I am not even, let us forget about the code. Let us just catch hold of this particular, this is, where is it? Here. Okay. So this is your URL, and you can go to here, you can go here and get it, generate the code. Okay. So let me just brief about curl. Okay, so curl is a program where you can the um, access the web or URL using command line. So that is why it's called as curl. C stands for command line. URL is nothing but URL that we are talking about, right? I'll just copy this and run this on a terminal. Let's see the output. Let me open a terminal here. Let me just enter. You can see that. So this is like whenever you use a web page, right? So far we are used to directly using the browser. So this is like not using the browser. So when I did this, so what happened is it is like opening this page on a browser and actually providing this to information, which is this into the data. So it's like using, I'll just explain here. So this is your URL. This is a complete URL, so which we are going to use. And this is the operation, which is nothing but your HTTP operation post. So this we are trying to do in, we can do it on the using request library using Python, or you can use, this is just for testing, right? This is a client. So curl is a program which is like command line URL. So this is a very old program. People used to run this and make, you can get web page and whatever. So if anything can be accessed via HTTP, you can use curl. Okay. So this is a different, this is a command that is available on Windows and even on like Linux, right? So using this command, you're trying to access this web page. So once you access this, you're trying to put some data, right? So that putting data is happening here in this -d, okay? And the input that you need to provide to that API is name and email ID. That is what you are providing. And this is the output that is coming from this server. So this is the input and this is the output. We are already getting that. Okay. So this is using curl. This is just for like testing. And the same thing can be, of course, achieved in Python, right? So which we have already done. So let us just go here. Same thing, we are going to do it in Python. Okay. So let us, okay, it is not given the code, but let me uh, snippet to access API using request in Python. That's all. I'll show you something. You can see that when I used post here in curl, it is allowing, right? So it is like message is successful and you'll get some status code and things like that. You can actually print the status code in curl. We're using some arguments. We don't require that right now, but you can see that when I try to do get on this particular API, which I have developed just now, using that API, it says that this method is not allowed. So this code is already getting generated from the framework, which is here. We have just defined this method, okay, methods that are allowed. So it is just the post that I have enabled. So if it is not any other thing we are trying to access or use, like get patch, anything like that, it will pop up this particular error. Okay. In fact, you can copy this and you can go to your browser. Let me bring that here. Whatever you're doing is exactly what browser does, but using the backend clients. This browser is a client, right? So it is trying to access this, but what is the let me go to the inspect. Okay, let me show you how the browser has triggered. Let us go to network. Let me just refresh the page. You can see that it has sent a request. This is a client, just like client.py we are creating, or the curl program. So this is one of the ways to access that service, right? So we are getting the method not allowed here. So how, from where are we getting here? How it is sending the request? It has sent this request, which is exactly we did in curl program or request program. So which we are going to write. The request method is get, and you are getting a status code, which is a output from your server. It is saying that 405 not method not allowed. So this is a default method that it is getting generated via this program. So this is all the all such things are automatically done here. So you can see that this is embedded in HTML, right? So why it is embedded in HTML? Because most of the times people try to use browser and it needs to look like this. Of course, you can change this. You can, so this is a default behavior from Flask, but you can change how to look, and you can also, instead of HTML, you can generate JSON and things like that. Okay. So this is curl. So we have access using curl. You have access using a browser. Which I'm trying to make you understand that this is a server, web server, and there are several different types of clients. One is command line client like curl. This UI client, which is browser. There is also some other clients like Postman and other things, which is used for API testing. You can use that as well. But inputs, you should know that what is the HTTP method that you're using, the URL, and the data if it's expecting something. Okay. Now let us get that code quickly. Create a client because we want to make that using it using Python, right? So let us insert this here. Now I think you are familiar with Python code already now, like looking at the code so far. Um, so this has got no function, just a simple client. You have got URL, you have got data, and we're going to send some request, which is exactly same thing what we did in curl here. This part, exactly same thing. You are doing in the this one. Exactly same thing that we did on the browser. We send this request. This is get, but we are sending post because from the from the browser we cannot actually do the patch and all these things directly. There is a way, but it's not allowed, right? It's just for user to click and all these things. So this is one sort of a client. This is one sort of a client. This is one sort of a client. Let us just try to run this program. Okay, you can see that when I ran this program, okay, let us try to debug this. Okay, error expecting value one character something here. Okay. Where is it coming from? Error occurred here. Request exceptions. Okay. So why is this coming? Let us try to understand what it means. So so how do you debug? So far we have learned how to debug, right? So one of the ways is to like put the breakpoint. Okay, and you can put print statements or you can put log and so on. So those are the debug methodologies. So if I run this, this is a client now. So I want to understand what is happening in that. Of course, I can see in the program, but I want to like use this. Okay, name and email ID is being sent. Okay, that's a dictionary. Okay, this is going to the data, and let me just take this code and run it. So how do you run this line now? So you are find out where you are in the execution, and line number 15 is going to be executed now. If I press next or N is a shortcut, you can see that it got executed. This line got executed. Now let us look at response here. You can see response is saying that okay, this is 403, which is like okay, you're not you're you got some access denied or something like that 403. Okay, so in order to see what does 403 means, it's since it's a protocol, it has got its meaning. 403 status code, it tells it's forbidden, indicates that server understands the request. Server is able to get that request, but refuses to authorize it. So why there is a problem here? Let us see. Okay. So I look at all these things and okay, the server here, this is the one which is uh, sending an exception from here. Okay. So that exception is got here in our client. So let us look at what is the content of the response. Okay. So you know how to find out like different attributes and variables, right? And or variables. Okay. The response dot I think it is this one. Okay, it's okay. So this is the error that we got from this program, right? So yeah, when I ran this, that is serving another terminal. Where was it? Here. Yeah. Okay, somewhere. Okay, forget that. So let us get here. Okay, this is the error that we saw from output of the client program, right? So that means this response has got some data, but it is unable to convert to JSON. So let us just try to print the raw content. So let us try to print a response dot. There is a variable called content. You can see that it is not getting anything. That is the reason that this particular uh, program, which is client, it is failing, but it is able to connect to the server. Okay. So our why it is failing, let us even debug further and let us understand that. Okay. 2 more minutes, I'll just finish it up. Okay, this now we understood what's happening. So there is response is empty, and we're getting status code 403. Okay, so that's about how to debug such things. So we debug this, we understood this, and now let us look at the API server. What's happening in API server? Okay, and there are no logs here, right? So let us try to. Okay, okay, there is a return JSONify and all these things. So you can actually, so at server end, so this is like you are testing this program. So I can say add logging to this file with various levels of logs. Okay. So I identified that this program is running and we need more logs to capture the errors. Okay, but we understood what's happening. So that program it's going and it is unable to insert. Most likely, so most likely it is like the email ID is already existing. Probably because using cur, we already have input with this. So probably if we change just to, let me change this. John Doctor something, John, something like this. And let me try to run it. If it works, that means that's the problem. Okay. So since we have breakpoint here, it is stopped here. So let me just press C, which is continue. Again, it is unable to send. Okay. Now we can debug and find out what's happening. So I have added code with all the logs. Take this and just paste it here. In agent mode, it does automatically, right? So I think we have seen that already. So let me run this again. API server. I'm going to run the API server. So the server is running. Okay, I'm going to client and run this. So you have already got the response, but okay. So when I run the client, okay, it's automatically getting aborted. So that's the problem. Okay. Let me run the server again. So let it keep running. Let me go to some other terminal. Let me go here and manually go into learn python.api and where is that program? ls it's in another folder. Code here, Python. Let me run this line.py. Python is not one because I have Python 3 installed. You can see that. Okay. Now you can see that it is successful, which means our client is getting. So the problem that we were facing was, so since I was clicking here, so it was running the program in the same terminal by aborting the previous program, which is this program. So it was aborting the server. So that is the reason we are getting an error saying that there is no response or something like that because server is not running. Okay. Now the server is running and from other terminal. So you can do it from the outside world as well, right? So you got that message subscriber successfully added. So this is how we debug, we understand the things. So for example, if you imagine that you had generated this code without knowing any of these concepts, right? Which we can do today in today's world, which you can just create uh, go to agent mode and say that I want so and so, so and so, this with the problem prompt engineering, and you say generate the program. So it will generate. It will also help you to how to run this and things like this. So when it comes to debugging, you will, without understanding, if you start debugging using agents, you won't have a mental picture. It's like you're in a forest and you're roaming around and you're unable to reach the destination. So sometimes, agent is sort of intelligent and then it will fix the problem, but you won't know the underlying design, what's happening if the server got killed or anything like that. So sometimes there will be specific errors. For example, API keys are not working properly, which means it doesn't matter how much you sort of get help with agents, it will never be able to solve because it cannot generate such secret keys and things like that, right? Because it is very specific to that program. Okay. So you need to understand the parts of the programs, and then you need to understand so how to interact with that program. So right now we have understood how to create a server, how to create an endpoint using Flask library, and then how to access it using various different methodologies. There is curl, which is a command line utility, using our own client, which we have just written here, and even using the browser. So this API, I can simply say in the agent mode, I can tell that, okay, instead of this, create an UI for me. So it will automatically create. So I don't want to like generate here, but we will generate it later, making a UI folder and proper folder structure. So it will generate a UI for this particular API. So that will be much more interesting. So because you can access directly on UI. Okay. Okay, so that's about today's class. We have created our own subscriber server. Now, in next class, we are going to put all of this thing together in separate folder structure, as if we are going to uh, make production code out of this and host it somewhere, which is currently we'll host it on your local server, and then build an UI and make sure try to figure out what are the things that is required for to run production uh, process or a software, and check those lists. And then probably on Friday or next Monday, I'll also tell you about little bit about CI/CD, what is continuous integration and continuous development, and I'll show some of the tools like Jenkins, probably GitHub or something like that, any one of the tools, and then we can automate all this process so that we can deploy the code, or test it automatically, and so on. Okay. So, but until now, we have just developed different components. Tomorrow we are going to aggregate all these things and then make it as one package. Okay. Okay, that's it for today's class. Thanks for staying long. Take care. Have a great day.